There are moments in history when an entire nation suddenly realizes it has been living in a matrix. Not a technological matrix like in the movies, but a psychological matrix. The belief that they cannot accomplish anything on their own. On September 30th, 2022, 20 million people in Burkina Faso woke up. And when a nation awakens, nothing can stop it. In the darkness of the presidential palace meeting room in Ouagadougou, a 34-year-old man made a decision that would change not only the fate of Burkina Faso, but would also rewrite the rules for the entire African continent. Ibrahim Traoré did not yet know that in the next 2 years, he would turn a country dismissed by the world into a symbol of a global self-reliance revolution. The awakening moment did not come from books or political speeches. It came from witnessing Burkinabe soldiers fighting terrorism in flip-flops, while politicians carried suitcases of cash to pay bribes. That was the moment when a new generation of leaders decided, enough, we will endure no more. To understand why what is happening in Burkina Faso is so revolutionary, we must first understand the machine that has operated for decades to keep Africa in a state of dependency. This is not some secret conspiracy. It is a public, sophisticated, and systematic system. The psychological control machine works like this. First, convince a nation that they are incapable of feeding themselves. Burkina Faso, a country nearly the size of Germany with fertile land, was taught that it needed to import food from Europe to survive. A nation producing 100 tons of gold every year, worth $6 billion, had a total GDP of only $18 billion because all its gold was exported raw to Europe. Economic control was even more insidious. Africa produces raw materials, the West processes them, and sells them back at 10 times the price. Burkina Faso exports raw cotton for $1 per kilogram, then imports cotton clothing for $20 per kilogram. They export raw gold, then import gold jewelry at 50 times the price. Intellectual control took place through the brain drain phenomenon. The brightest minds of Burkina Faso were given scholarships to the West and never came back. They were taught that success meant leaving home. Those who stayed were taught that their ancestors' traditional solutions were backward and only Western technology could solve their problems. Worst of all was cultural control. For decades, Burkinabe were taught that French was more civilized than their native tongues, that European clothing was modern compared to traditional dress, that success meant copying the West instead of developing their own identity. The result was a strong people convinced they were weak, a resource-rich nation convinced it was poor, an ancient civilization convinced it needed to be saved by the very people who had plundered it for centuries. The collective psychology of Burkina Faso before 2022 could be summed up in one sentence: we cannot live without them. Without European aid, we will starve. Without Western technology, we cannot develop. Without foreign investment, we cannot create jobs. This was the matrix that Ibrahim Traoré broke. But to break a matrix, you must first realize you're in one. And his moment of realization came on the harsh battlefields of northern Burkina Faso, where he saw the gap between words and action, between theory and reality. Ibrahim Traoré is not just a leader. He is a philosopher of action, an architect of consciousness, a catalyst for transformation. To understand him, we must understand the philosophy he represents, a philosophy planted by Thomas Sankara and now brought to life by Traoré. His core philosophy can be summed up in one sentence: every nation has within itself everything it needs to prosper. This is not a political slogan, but a scientific principle of human potential. When Traoré looked at Burkina Faso, he did not see a poor nation in need of aid. He saw a rich nation being exploited. He applied this principle to concrete policy. Instead of seeking aid to buy agricultural machinery from Europe, he invested $150 million to produce machinery domestically. Instead of exporting raw gold and importing jewelry, he built Burkina Faso's first gold refinery, capable of processing 150 tons of gold per year. His philosophy on cultural foundations was equally revolutionary. He believed that innovation builds best on cultural foundations. Instead of abandoning tradition to copy the West, the most successful societies integrate traditional wisdom with modern technology. He established the National Support Center for Handcrafted Cotton Processing, merging traditional weaving knowledge with modern techniques. The psychology of a revolutionary lies in the ability to see patterns others miss. While other politicians saw separate problems, Traoré saw the system. He understood that poverty, terrorism, and foreign dependency were not three separate problems, but three symptoms of the same issue: loss of sovereignty. Traoré thought in generations, not election cycles. When he signed a $500 million deal with Russia to build a nuclear power plant, he wasn't thinking about short-term political gains. He was thinking about ensuring Burkina Faso's industrialization would have sufficient energy for the next 50 years. And most importantly, he had the courage of conviction. When Traoré rejected loans from the IMF and World Bank, he knew he was confronting powerful interests. But he also understood that real change always demands the courage to challenge assumptions others believe untouchable. His methodology operates in 4 stages. The first stage is consciousness raising, changing the story of Burkina Faso's potential, connecting to cultural pride and historical memory, creating a new language of capability instead of limitation. The second stage is institutional transformation, restructuring government to serve citizens, not donors, reprioritizing from dependency to self-reliance, building partnerships based on equality. The third stage is economic revolution, focusing on productive capacity rather than consumption, developing local value chains, keeping wealth circulating domestically. The fourth stage is cultural renaissance, reviving traditional knowledge systems, integrating ancient wisdom with modern technology, creating a new identity as producers and innovators. But philosophy means nothing without action, and Traoré's actions have ignited a movement shaking not just Burkina Faso, but all of Africa. A revolution is never just about one person. It's about the moment when one person's awareness spreads and becomes the awareness of many. In Burkina Faso, this spread happened with astonishing speed and scale, like a tsunami of consciousness sweeping the nation. The psychological spread followed scientific laws. At first, people were skeptical. They had been disappointed too many times by political promises. Another 34-year-old saying he'll change everything, they thought. But the earliest believers were farmers, the ones who knew Burkina Faso's land had always been fertile, only lacking tools and opportunity. The turning point came when results became visible, when 400 tractors were distributed for free, along with 710 engine pumps and high-quality seeds. Agricultural output soared. Farmers no longer had to wait for the rainy season. They began producing year-round. For the first time in history, Burkina Faso was not just food self-sufficient, but able to export. The collective psychology shifted rapidly, from "we need someone to help us" to "we can solve this ourselves." From "there aren't enough resources to do anything" to "we have everything we need, we just need to organize." From "I must look out for myself" to "we succeed together or fail together." In agriculture, farmers began experimenting with improved traditional seeds. Local agricultural cooperatives formed naturally. Knowledge-sharing networks sprang up spontaneously. Innovation and adaptation occurred at the grassroots level. In education, teachers began integrating local knowledge into curricula. Students developed pride in local culture and capability. Education priorities shifted to practical skills plus cultural identity. The brain drain slowed as opportunities emerged locally. In the economy, entrepreneurs began seeking local solutions. Investment shifted from foreign partnerships to local capacity. New business models emerged based on creating local value. Economic nationalism carried no hostility toward foreigners. Institutional transformation happened in parallel. Ministries were restructured from aid coordination to production support. Budgets were reallocated from prestige projects to productive infrastructure. Success was measured by self-reliance indices instead of donor satisfaction. Decision-making prioritized long-term sustainability. Economic policy revolution included import substitution with realistic timelines, support for local industries and value-added processing, a financial system designed to serve local production, and trade policies protecting emerging industries. Cultural policy transformation included official recognition of traditional knowledge systems, integrating local languages into official communication, cultural events celebrating self-reliance and innovation, and media policy promoting positive African narratives. The network effect spread beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Revolutions do not respect borders. Traoré's ideas and Burkina Faso's successes began to resonate across Africa and beyond. Regional inspiration emerged as leaders from other African nations studied the model. Youth movements across Africa adopted similar philosophies. Regional cooperation was based on mutual strength rather than mutual weakness. Pan-African consciousness revived with practical applications. Global attention forced international development organizations to reassess their approaches. Academic institutions studied the phenomenon. Media shifted from skepticism to curiosity to admiration. Global South countries noted an alternative development path. Perhaps the most important intellectual revolution Traoré contributed to was a new development theory based on endogenous capacity, challenging neo-colonial assumptions about Africa's potential and proving an alternative modernization path. It became proof of concept for self-reliant development. But the true measure of revolution is the transformation it creates. And in Burkina Faso, transformation is happening at every level of society, from individuals to communities to the nation. Numbers and policies tell only part of the story. Real transformation happens at the level of individuals, how they think about themselves, how they relate to the world, how they imagine the future. In Burkina Faso, this transformation is happening with unprecedented intensity and scope. The transformation of personal psychology followed clear steps, from dependency to autonomy. I used to think we needed someone to help us. Now I know we can solve this ourselves. Musa Ouedraogo, a 45-year-old farmer from Kaya, shares, I used to plant just enough to survive the season. Now I plant to feed the community and even export. The difference is not the land or the seeds, it's the mindset. I realized I can be a producer, not just a survivor. From scarcity mindset to abundance mindset, I used to think we didn't have enough resources to do anything. Now I know we have everything we need, we just need to organize. Fatimata Sanogo, a 52-year-old traditional weaver, says, when the handcrafted cotton processing support center opened, I realized the skills my mother taught me weren't outdated. They just needed to be combined with new technology. Now I teach 30 young people and our products sell across West Africa. From individual thinking to collective thinking, I used to think I had to take care of myself alone. Now I understand we succeed or fail together. Aminata Compaore, a 38-year-old teacher, shares, my students used to dream about escaping Burkina Faso. Now they dream about building it. They see possibility instead of limitation. That's all education needs to do, show people what's possible. Societal transformation happens when personal transformation occurs at scale. A new economic ecosystem is forming with local production networks, spontaneous innovation clusters, financial self-multiplication, and a focus on value creation instead of just resource extraction. Social structures are evolving with stronger, more effective community organizations, intergenerational knowledge transfer, women taking leadership in new economic activities, and youth seeing a future at home instead of abroad. Cultural renaissance includes the revival of local languages, traditional knowledge validated and modernized, new artistic expression celebrating self-reliance, and spiritual renewal, linking cultural identity with economic success. Institutional evolution is evident in a government more responsive to citizens, education relevant to local development needs, healthcare innovation integrating traditional and modern medicine, and legal frameworks supporting local business and innovation. National transformation results from the combination of individual and societal transformation. Economic indicators show food security shifting from import dependence to export capacity, job creation in productive sectors, improved trade balance with fewer imports and more value-added exports, and financial independence with less reliance on aid and foreign loans. Social indicators include education outcomes with relevant skills and cultural pride, health statistics with better nutrition and access, stronger social cohesion around national solidarity, and migration trends with youth staying and diaspora returning. International standing includes regional leadership with other countries studying the Burkina Faso model, global recognition for successful self-reliant development, negotiating partnerships from a position of strength rather than weakness, and growing cultural and intellectual soft power. The most important intangible transformation is the unmeasurable change, national confidence in collective capability, long-term future-oriented planning instead of daily survival, creative energy with innovation and experimentation at every level, and moral prestige from standing for dignity and self-determination. The story of Ibrahim Traoré, a 29-year-old entrepreneur, sums up this transformation. I used to think success meant foreign partners, foreign investment. Now I realize real success comes from building something the community owns and controls. Profit isn't just money, it's dignity. But this transformation isn't just meaningful for Burkina Faso. It is creating ripples worldwide, challenging fundamental assumptions about power, development, and human capability. A real revolution can never be confined within borders. Ideas tend to spread, especially when those ideas are proven with concrete results. The Burkina Faso revolution is sending ripples across the world with deeper impact than anyone imagined. An African renaissance is underway with continent-wide awakening. Other African leaders are questioning dependency models. Mali and Niger have followed Burkina Faso's lead, forming the Alliance of Sahel States, a military and economic bloc free from Western control. Pan-African youth movements are inspired by self-reliance. African economic cooperation is strengthening, with African nations trading more among themselves. Cultural pride is renewed with greater appreciation of African knowledge systems. Inspiration for the Global South comes from proof that self-reliant development is possible. South-South cooperation is emerging with partnerships built on mutual respect. Knowledge sharing now includes traditional solutions gaining global recognition. An alternative political model challenges Western-imposed governance structures. An academic revolution includes new development theory based on endogenous capacity, research priorities focusing on local knowledge and solutions, educational curricula featuring African success stories, and publishing African perspectives on a global platform. Media transformation is changing the narrative, from Africa as a problem to Africa as a source of solutions. Documentary interest is rising, with filmmakers capturing the transformation. Social media now features African voices controlling their own narrative. Cultural products, music, literature, art celebrate self-reliance. Generational impact measures a revolution's true depth by its effect on future generations. Children growing up in Burkina Faso today will have a worldview completely different from that of their parents. The next generation's foundation includes education that teaches children they are creators, not just consumers, skills development with practical ability to solve local problems, cultural grounding with a strong sense of identity and capability, and a global vision with confident participation in the world as equals. Institutional sustainability includes policy frameworks designed to maintain self-reliance, economic structures with built-in protection against renewed dependency, cultural preservation mechanisms, sustaining revolutionary values, and leadership pipelines with new generations committed to this path. Regional integration includes economic blocs with African nations cooperating as equals, knowledge networks sharing innovation and best practices, cultural exchanges celebrating diversity while building unity, and political coordination with common positions at international forums. Global transformation, if the Burkina Faso model spreads successfully, would mean a complete rethink of how nations develop, a fairer global power structure, economic systems with trade based on mutual benefit instead of exploitation, and cultural renaissance with respect for all civilizations and knowledge systems. A call for global revolution. Ibrahim Traoré and the Burkina Faso revolution teach us universal principles applicable everywhere. The power of belief. Transformation begins in the mind. When people believe in their capabilities, those capabilities expand. This is true for individuals, communities, and nations. The importance of self-reliance. Real power comes from developing your own capacity rather than depending on others. This doesn't mean isolation. It means engaging from a position of strength. The value of cultural foundations. Innovation builds best on cultural foundations. Instead of abandoning tradition, successful societies integrate traditional wisdom with modern techniques. The necessity of courage. Change demands courage. Courage to challenge existing systems, courage to try new approaches, courage to believe in possibilities others dismiss. Your personal revolution, witnessing Burkina Faso's transformation, raises the question, what revolution could happen in your own life, in your own community, at the individual level? What dependencies can you eliminate? What capabilities can you develop? How can you contribute to, rather than only consume from your community? At the community level, what local problems could be solved with local resources? What traditional knowledge is undervalued? How can community members support each other's development? At the national level, what artificial limitations has your country accepted? What resources are being exported raw that could be processed locally? How can citizens take greater responsibility for national development? Revolutionary thinking. Ibrahim Traoré has shown us that revolution doesn't require violence, only a clear vision of what's possible, commitment to practical action, belief in human potential, willingness to challenge assumptions, and perseverance in the face of skepticism. The final challenge. Burkina Faso has proven that transformation is possible. The question is, who will be next? Which community, nation, or individual will adopt the revolutionary mindset and create their own transformation? When Ibrahim Traoré signed a $500 million agreement to build Burkina Faso's first nuclear power plant, he wasn't just securing energy for his country, he was sending a message to the world. The era when Africa only produced raw materials is over. The era when poor nations had to ask permission to develop is over. The era when people accepted limits imposed by others is over. When he nationalized British and Canadian gold mines for just $80 million, a fraction of the $300 million they were sold for in 2023, he was rewriting the rules of the global game. Africa's resources will serve African people. Africa's wealth will build Africa. When he refused IMF and World Bank loans, declaring that Africa does not need the World Bank, IMF, Europe, or America, he was breaking the psychological chains that had bound Africa for centuries. This is not just the story of a young leader in a small nation. This is the story of a moment when humanity realizes that every people, every community, every individual has within them everything they need to prosper. The revolution is waiting. The question is, are you ready to join? From the wheat fields of Burkina Faso to factories in South Korea, from classrooms in Brazil to corporate boardrooms in the United States, the spirit of Ibrahim Traoré is spreading, the spirit of a generation refusing to accept the limits imposed by the previous one. In 2022, a 34-year-old in Burkina Faso decided his country didn't have to be poor, that Africa didn't have to be weak, that people didn't have to accept a fate decided by others. 2 years later, he has proven himself right. Now, the question is no longer whether change is possible. The question is, where will the change begin next?